Good evening. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to the Progressive Democrats of Howard County panel discussion on systemic racism in Howard County. Before I get into the program, Jake, did you wanna say something? Or should we go straight to the program?
I'll just for people in case this is your first time coming to a Progressive Democrats of Howard County event, this is we are a relatively new group. We just had our first birthday back in May, I think, so we're just over a year old, and events like tonight's talking about systemic racism in the county and how that plays out, and talking about issues that don't really get talked about in the county, that sort of really encapsulates why we decided to form this group. And by the way, I should have said this earlier, my name is Jake Burdett. I'm the president of the club here, but that is why we decided to form this club, is we felt that in the Democratic Party in Howard County, a lot of these conversations were not being had either intentionally or unintentionally. So if you'd like to get involved in this sort of thing and everything else that the club's doing, especially now with the election season coming up, please consider signing up for our email list, becoming a dues paying member, following us on social media. We have a podcast. You do all that on our link tree. I'll put the link in the chat, but it's linktr.ee/HoCo Progressives. And thank you, Hiruy, and the rest of the executive board for putting this discussion on tonight.
All right. Thanks, Jake. I think you mentioned something key there, in that these are issues that are not being discussed by the Democratic Party. And we can say, why not the Republican Party? And I think that sort of, I think, answers itself mainly because of the sort of like where the party is right now. But besides that, though, I think, we have to look at who is in power in Howard County, who has been in power for many years. I'm talking about at least 2 decades, maybe more. There's been some form of majority, supermajority or majority in Howard County led by the Democratic Party. And so that's why I think the focus is there. I'm a registered Democrat, and I think it's important that I question my leaders and figure out why are they not paying attention to some of these issues. So this is why that's the motivation for this panel. So I'm joined by some panelists here who have I think they have demonstrated their knowledge and their in this in the topics that we'll discuss today, and which our group PDHC considers a subset of the area where black and brown families are adversely affected. So in Howard County, issues and causes of material impact to people of color are wedge issues. They're not something to be solved. Rather, they are issues to be exploited to advance the economic and political power of an entrenched structure. Columbia was a city envisioned to integrate people from all walks of life, a place where people with different levels of income could live within the same community. Today, this is not the case. Columbia, and more broadly, Howard County, is segregated by income and race. This is not an accident. This is not by accident. We can thank thousands of legislative action over the past 3 decades or so, where legislators and county executives implemented zoning and land use ordinances that gave staggering levels of benefits and entitlements to developers, leading to this segregation by income and race. Meanwhile, we, the stakeholders of this, what I consider a fragile system of government that relies on the good faith of its leaders, have been subjected to countless acts of what I would characterize as manufactured outrage by those who employ the plight of the vulnerable as a wedge issue. The most recent example being the smear of a council member by certain leaders affiliated with the developer interests by accusing this council member of racism. To anyone who has observed this pattern before, the motive is all too apparent. The county's political and economic establishment wants unfettered access to taxpayer dollars, and anyone standing in its way will be discredited, delegitimized, and disposed of. Just last year, the county's largest developer, Howard Hughes Corporation, funded a sinister effort to hijack the Columbia Association elections. It enlisted a former county executive and other community leaders to organize a campaign called the Rouse Project, with the stated purpose of increasing diversity, quote unquote, in the CA board. Again, this was a transparent attempt to reappropriate taxpayer dollars to Howard Hughes Corporation. There are countless examples of intentionally and negligently implemented policies and laws that are worthy of our outrage, and that we have not seen discussed. So today we'll discuss some of those examples, and now to help us with that discussion, we'll give our panelists a chance to introduce themselves. We'll start with Tanika Richardson.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thanks for that introduction. I'm Tanika Richardson. I am running on the HoCo for Us slate as well. And I've been living in Howard County for about 16 years. And my background is in housing policy, both state, federal, and local.
Thank you, Tanika. We will go next to Lizette. Hey, Lizette, you're muted.
Hi, yeah, I'm sorry. My daughter is burning something in the kitchen and it's making us coughing. So, yes, sorry about that. My name is Lizette Rayaratnam, and I'm running for with the HoCo for Us slate. And this is the my first time involved in politics in the United States. I was born in the middle of a revolution back in Cuba. Not that I'm born in 1959, no. I was born in 1970s. That was one of the worst crises. And then I have been living here in United States since the year of 2000. And I'm trying to be a leader here for the Latino community, trying to represent and help everyone that is documented or undocumented, or everyone that has not a voice here. And yeah, I'm just a mom, just a local citizen. I mean, that's it. And I have 3 daughters. So.
Thank you, Lizette. And next we have Rick Cohen.
Yeah, I've lived here since 1996 in Howard County. I've seen changes. I think developers were always in charge of the government, but there were better developers in the past. And the Rouse vision was more inclusive and more toward integration. And I've just seen that change. So I'm also running on the HoCo for Us slate because I don't like some of the changes that have occurred. And I think we need to have more popular input. And I can talk a bit. I've done some analysis of the school system and segregation that's occurring, which I think is a big problem in our county and across the country. But I can talk about some of the implications of that.
Thanks, Rick. I think it's no accident that the panelists are on the HoCo for Us slate. A lot of the people that came together to form the slate were dissatisfied with the status quo in the county, and they having recognized where the source is and how to address it. That's where I think I would say it's no accident. A lot of motivated people who want to see changes in the county. Okay, so Tanika, we'll start with a question for you. We had some in our interview a few weeks back. You really you touched on a lot of issues related to affordable housing, and you mentioned you had made some observations about how housing is distributed in this county. Can you talk about your observations about the housing distribution in the county?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who don't know, when I moved here back in 2005, I was able to move. I've relocated to Howard County from Baltimore City using the housing mobility voucher, right? So for those who don't know, that's like a voucher that kind of helps subsidize your income. And that program was brought about as part of a lawsuit, right? It was the Thompson versus Hart lawsuit back down in Baltimore, because they were pretty much essentially saying, just to keep the story short, that the housing authorities and things in Baltimore City were kind of segregating poverty, right? Just like placing pockets of certain poverty in certain parts of the city, and that was kind of discriminatory, which kind of brought the whole demolishing of the high rises and all that other type of nature. And then came this settlement. So as part of that settlement, families were able to apply to what they call a mobility voucher. And it's just called that because essentially when you get a voucher, you're supposed to live in a district that you get your voucher in, but with a mobility voucher, you get to relocate to other areas, what they were calling areas of opportunity. So back in 2005, I came to Howard County. I had no ties to this county at all. It was like a culture shock coming here, right? Because, all my family was still in the city. I had a car, but it sucked. It wasn't the best car at the time. I had 2 small young children back then. So I was doing a lot of commuting and stuff back and forth, still going back into the city. But once I fully transitioned and got acclimated to the neighborhood, yeah, like certain things just became apparent, to your point. And again, like at the time, I didn't necessarily know like all of these terms. Like I didn't know about the social determinants of health, and I didn't know about, poverty, segregation. I didn't know about any of that stuff. I just know I got a chance to leave Baltimore City, and I took that opportunity to, have a better future for my kids. But as I started like going to college, and I started learning the different things, and I started volunteering in the neighborhood, and I was like, okay, it's definitely certain villages in Columbia that are, more invested in than others. One of the first things I noticed, for example, was like Long Reach to me was always, underinvested in. And I just remember thinking back then, like if this was a neighborhood in Baltimore City, like this is what we would call, like a food desert. Because like for the longest time, and they still don't have a supermarket over there. And it's been going on for years and years and years and years. And I remember I was going over there at one point because my kid's dentist office was over there. And I was like, this thing needs to be tearing down and just start building up, right? So it was like, I kind of started like noticing those different things. And I didn't understand at the time, I didn't know like the history of Columbia, like why it was built. So So that's when I really became involved, because I was like, okay, essentially what I'm seeing here in Columbia is the same things that was happening in Baltimore City, right? With the red line and the disinvestments, the concentration in poverty. And then what happened just a few years ago, we had to do this whole redistricting thing. You know, they want to bus kids, they want to do all this. And I'm pretty sure I'm on the record, but if I'm not, I can go on the record now because I speak for myself. You know, I'm not gonna I was on the fence about that, right? I was on the fence about, like, I get the overall equity and all of that. I get that. But at the same time, I was like, it's not solving the underlying issue, right? The underlying issue is that we have pockets and concentration of poverty. So moving kids around just for the numbers to look good on paper is not solving the issue. Like, what are we going to do for the issue part, right? So that was just like my whole thing. And it's just really sad. Like, we doing all this development, you know, in downtown Columbia, you know, that stuff is not affordable. We have stuff being built in Fulton, Maryland, that stuff is not affordable, right? Then we say, okay, well, can we build out Western Howard County? They're like, oh, well, we don't have transportation, there's no infrastructure. So it's just, to me, like, okay, well, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? Something needs to happen in order for us to have progress. And I just think that it's unfair to keep, you know, putting things in certain neighborhoods that are already oversaturated, you know, with lack of resources and poverty and stuff already. I think, you know, I'm pretty sure people could guess that I'm just on the record that I feel like things need to be equally distributed, and whatever that means from a developer standpoint, a politics standpoint, it just needs to happen because it makes sense. Otherwise, I feel like we'll be having another redistricting for the same reasons in a couple of years.
Thanks, Tanika. So we'll stick to that theme of, you know, the redistricting that was done in, you know, a couple of years ago, and you know, so transition to Rick here. You know, so Rick, you've provided a lot of various in-depth reports and proposals on redistricting before. So, you know, based on your observations, you know, what can you tell us about the socioeconomic makeup of the schools, and some of those, you know, discussions that were taking place also at that time about the redistricting proposal?
Yeah, thank you. That was a great introduction. Not just you, Hiruy, but also Tanika. So I just posted in the chat data2knowledge.info, which is where I have things that I posted. And that was actually a couple years old now, at least a few years old even. But I left it up because it's all still relevant. And the only reason I don't have it updated, well, there's two reasons, but one of the main reasons it's not updated is they don't provide data very often. And so there isn't much to update, but it's summary of the distribution of students, mostly by income level, because that's what I had data for, but they also follow by race because of the income level of different races in the county with the legacy of racism that exists. So what we have is a problem mostly of development. What the developers like to do now, what they admit they like to do is to concentrate wealth in certain areas. And if they have to develop or put any affordable housing anywhere, they like to concentrate it in an area that they don't feel as valuable. In other words, an area that already has a lot of affordable housing. Basically, they like to segregate people by income, and they say that gives them the most value. They can sell those mansions, and they don't get as much money for the mansion if those kids have to go to a school, or if they have to have a neighbor who isn't rich, right? That's their thinking. And so that's what the developers have liked to do. It's contrary to what originally was done when Howard County was built. Things that Jim Rouse promoted was to actually have integration of incomes in Columbia. And it was actually very successful. It created a good sense of community, and it did not cause the divisions that we have among races, but in economic groups and so forth that we have today, because people were neighbors. And he also, and maybe this turned out to be a flaw, but he also had green space everywhere. So all of the areas were nice and pleasant to live in and not overcrowded. The problem with the green space is that when the Rouse Company went away and was bought out, that provided a place to put additional housing. And so the green space got used up. And so what we have is schools that are very, very crowded, and they're very, very segregated. But that didn't go quite far enough. So we came up with these redistricting plans, which, in contrast to what people say, oh, you're busing my kids to a poor school, something like that, it was actually the opposite. The school system was busing students farther, having students go to schools that were farther than the optimal distance so that they could keep the income distribution even more segregated in the schools than it is in the communities. So they had about an average, I think came out to about 1.5 miles per student distance in order to, for example, I always forget, Maple Lawn has people coming from all over the southern part of the county. And some of them, there are, I believe, 5 elementary schools that they can go to. All of the wealthy neighborhoods go to one school. All of the lower income neighborhoods go to other schools. And you have, in some cases, an elementary school that is 80% Black and Hispanic and more than 50% on free and reduced meals, adjacent to, next to a school that is 80% white and Asian and less than 5% on free and reduced meals. That's how much segregated it is. And they're right next to each other, 1.5 miles apart. Okay, so you can't tell me that it's just the neighborhoods. It's more than that. The school system is further segregating. And then they get into the school and they develop programs for even more segregation because of the so-called GT program, which I think is in some cases useful and a good thing to have, because if people have already mastered content, great for them to be able to move forward. But in some cases, they're making these divisions also to keep the low-income students separated from the wealthy students, even within a school system, and providing different resources to those students, providing more resources to the wealthier students because they're in the GT program. So, so we have a problem. On my website, you can look at some of the articles. One of the things that I think also stood out was summarizing arrests by SROs in the schools. In the state, a Black student is 3 times more likely to be arrested than a white student. In Howard County, a Black student is 6 times more likely to be arrested than a white student. So, and if a Black student attends a school that has a high minority population, they're much more likely to be arrested than otherwise. So, we have that problem. And the other thing that you'll see, that a common thread through this, is that the best predictor of how your child will do in any school in Howard County and pretty much anywhere in the state is how much money you make. Okay, it doesn't matter what school they go to. If you make a lot of money, it's a very good predictor. Your child is probably going to do a lot better. And the kids who come from families with decent income do fine no matter what school they go to. And the kids who don't have a lot of income at home don't do very well in Howard County, no matter what school they go to. And so that is what we have to address. That isn't so much an issue of segregation. I think that's another issue. And I think the segregation causes a lot of tension that doesn't need to be there. And that it would be easier to distribute resources and to provide for everyone if schools were more integrated. But in addition to that, the people going to segregated schools are not really learning what it's like in the real world. They're not getting a real world experience. And I think they're not really prepared for the world as much as students that are going to integrated schools.
Thanks, Rick. So Lizette, I want to give you an opportunity to maybe speak on the redistricting and the affordable housing discussion that we just had, and you had mentioned to me before the gap in opportunity for different demographics, and so after after you talk about the if you wanted to touch on the affordable housing and redistricting aspect, and then maybe you could talk about that gap in opportunity that that you had mentioned to me before.
Mhm. Well, before I moved here to Maryland, well, I have lived in Oklahoma, in California, now Maryland. So before I moved here to Maryland, even coming from California, everything was, totally different. And then I got my third grader, my fifth grader, and then one day they say, oh, okay, we're going to give your daughters the cloaked test. And I was thinking, oh, okay, here we go. And then when they came with the result, they said that they were everything was about 95, and they can go to the GT classes and I was here is a catch. And then they said, no, that's all. I said, really? And I go like, how come you apply the COGAT test to everyone? It's not by recommendation of the teacher. It's not because your mom is involved in the PTA, or they said, no, here is applied to everyone. And I was, okay, now we are talking about opportunity. Now we are closing the gap. So that was a good start, okay, for me. Because back in California, if you want your kid to be in GT classes, it has to be recommended by the teacher, by the counselor. If your mom is a PTSA mom, of course. And if your mom is a Girl Scout leader, all those things count. In California, they are very clannish and very cliquish. But here I was happy to see that here it was kind of like I was, okay, here we go. And then I started on the schools, and then I start seeing the reality, not because my kids are only Hispanic, but for the other Hispanic kids, then that's when I start seeing the disparity, between my Hispanic kids, that they're my children, and the other Hispanic kids. So that's when I start, questioning about, well, is this a really truly democracy? If this really about achievement gap, or is more like an opportunity gap? So they were always trying to push achievement gap. And I was like, what is the achievement gap? Why every time I go to the PDHC asking for money to establish a homework club to help out the Hispanic student and the ESOL student, why there never is money for that? So I remember one time when my oldest daughter, she was at Centennial, I'm in one of the PTA meeting, and then they are planning this huge, what is that, prom party? Like, when they graduate, they have this huge prom party, and I see the numbers, and they are donating thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and the party was like the whole cost of the whole party was like $45,000. And I was, this is just, these people, they live in this earth or what? I was outrageous. How come they can spend so much money? In my country, first, in my country, we don't have a prom or graduation after high school, because you have only your graduation and your big party when you finish your university. That's first. So for me, it was a surprise that they do. I said, well, you are supposed to finish high school. Why should I celebrate you finish high school? That's part of your student life, no? So anyway, by the way, none of my daughter, it's not because of me, but they didn't go. Two of my daughters that I graduated, they didn't go to the proms or anything like that. They say it was for what? Anyway, so thank goodness that they think like that. So that was, a lot of things that I started seeing in the budget right there inside the schools, that even the budget that was allocated for PTA or PTSA, whatever you want to call it, they were just spending in whatever they want. So they were not really, in academics or in the people who really need it. So, I mean, Centennial High School, it was a total bubble. And if you are Latino, you will be segregated. You will be, I mean, that was one of the first time that I had started the Latin American Council, because I want to gather all the Latino parents, and I want, to explain how does the system works here. And I remember the first meeting, I invite everyone, the parents and the students, and they didn't even have an idea that you have to have 21 credit to graduate high school, that you need to have 75 hours of volunteering. All this information that is there in the website, they didn't know, because they don't even know how to access the website. So in every meeting that I was having, so then it became a fight, because with the PTA, because the PTA is supposed to give every minority group a budget, okay? And that budget, you as a president of the minority group, or as a chair, you will use it for, the meetings with the parents, and then buy cookies and this and that. And then you have to document it to get reimbursed. And then I was having problem with the PDHC president because I didn't want to use that money for the meetings. And I told my parents right from the beginning, I'm not spending a cookie or a money or a dime on a pen. Whoever wants to eat in the meeting, you can bring your own food. It's out of your pocket. This money is going to go for the seniors, students, Latino graduating seniors that are going to pursue higher education. Because guess what? Whatever we give it to them, $200, $300, $500 at the end of the year, when they are graduating, those $500, they are going to use it to continue to whatever. At Howard Community College, they can pay 1 credit, 2 credit classes, whatever, So that started because the PTA didn't want me to use the money for the students. So it was the whole, contradiction and things like it was. And then I was like, well, we need it, the Latino is the most in need. I was just working last year in Oakland Mill High School, and my students, they will be dismissed at 2, and then I will stay from 2:30 all the way to 4:10 or something like that, just to do a volunteer homework club for the Hispanic students. So, I mean, it's not because I want to be Mother Teresa or anything like that, but because I want my people, my population to go ahead. And they don't realize that the Hispanic that we are here, that we decide to be here, I'm paying high rent, I'm paying high taxes, I'm paying everything, because I want my kids to be in a safe city. I want my kids to be in the crown jewel that Howard County says that they have, that is a public school, that they don't invest so much in the crown jewel, and they should. So I'm going to stop right there. What else do you want me to talk?
Oh, well, no, that I think, what I gather from what you from what you just said, Lizette, is there's I think given that this county has the county has a big budget. Every year the county allocates a lot of money to different programs, and there doesn't seem to be money for the important programs like providing resources for the people without opportunity to accomplish their goals. So whether it's doing their homework or getting other assistance. So that's, so far, I think that's what we have that we have described in various ways. Now, my question to everyone is, I'll start with Tanika. And by the way, if you if anybody has any questions, please send it to message it to either Karen or Jake. Is that okay? And then we can ask it in a few minutes.
Yeah, that works. People got also just put them in the chat if they want.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's good too. Okay, so my question then is, why? Clearly, these are not like, these are glaring problems. Everybody knows these problems exist. Why has nobody done anything about these so far? Why do they persist, and why do they continue to get worse every year? So we'll start with let's start with the Tanika, and then go to Rick, and then go to Lisette.
I mean, it's called a spade. That's clearly, political interest for, whatever reasons. I didn't realize. Matter of fact, I just had a friend who just kind of joined a different coalition, and she's doing stuff down in Baltimore City. And she called me after a meeting one day and was like, "So is politics really this messy?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's a lot of, one hand washes the other, a lot of backhand deals and stuff that goes into decision making when it comes to policies." And it's unfortunate because a lot of times when you have those closed deals and you're not hearing the public's feedback or having open sessions, then a lot of times those things are dealt, our decisions are made, without the public's interest in mind, right? And that's why you kind of see the issue that we have today. And it's just so funny because I was supposed to be a nurse, right? Like, that was my whole goal since high school, was to go and be a nurse practitioner. I would have been a nurse practitioner with my own practice by now. That was the goal. But it was like, once I really got into like housing policy and really realized that everything everyone is kind of talking about, it kind of all ties down, to housing. Like, because to Rick's point, he mentioned about no matter where you live, it all comes down to like your income, and your kids will still do well. But we also know where you live, when you first really starting up and coming up, we also know that where you live can also determine your economic opportunities as well, right? So it's like housing is the central piece for everything. It's the central piece for your economic growth, your health, your education attainment. Is literally tied to everything. And when I really started getting, remind me, guys, I don't know if like PBS, somebody did a story on Ross when Columbia had like that 50th anniversary. And I remember watching it and I was like, oh my God, like, I know this man is turning over in his grave, because this is not what he envisioned. This is not the dream. Like, it's like, where's his descendants? Like, it's just like so ridiculous to me. And like, for example, like the symphony of, I'm like, it's not even a symphony of woods anymore. It's like the symphony of buildings. Like, where the hell did the trees go? Like, it's just so much overdevelopment stuff going on. This causes other problems. And just like we're on this call, and we see what the issue is, they see what the issue is too. It's just whether or not they're going to have the courage to actually do something about it before the issue continuously gets further out of hand. So
yeah, I agree, Tanika. I really wish that we definitely have a lack of sense of urgency here. I really wish we had more press conferences on these issues by a lot of these community leaders who were expressing outrage about issues that affect people of color. So next, Rick.
Yeah, Tanika, I remember that coverage of the 50th anniversary of Columbia, and my own headline for that was Columbia's anniversary, 20 great years of progress and 30 years of counter progress, because something happened and it started going the opposite direction decades, a couple decades ago. But that's exactly how I felt. It was like talking about a place that, it was really off to a good start. But why aren't we going anywhere? I mean, we don't control the county government. The developers do, and they're making more money and they're protecting their wealth, they think. And I think they're also mistaken as to the value. And a lot of people are mistaken sometimes because it's profitable for the people giving them the information for them to be mistaken. But people have the wrong idea that living next to someone, if your neighbor isn't as wealthy as you are, that it's going to demean your quality of life or your house or your school or whatever. And it's not. I've lived in apartments and I wasn't a bad person. A lot of these people lived in apartments in part of their life. And were they bad people then? Maybe they were, maybe that's the problem, but I wasn't. And so I don't have a fear of that. I don't, I think more integration would be much better. And then, there would be a store you could get to, because they would be able to support that. Now, I think we just have to be vigilant. I think we made some progress in the right direction. And I know Drew is trying to get me to look at data and things again, which I think I need to do for this time around. I haven't gotten to it yet. When I did the analysis previously, I had a little extra time. Right now, I don't have quite as much time at work, but I think I will take a look at it again.
You did a good job last time, by the way. And I thought you came out with some really good stuff. So yeah, go do.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll take a look at it again. I also, last time I wasn't sure what the results were going to be. Now I kind of think I know how they're going to come out. But one of the opportunities last time, and this opportunity is probably there again, is that you could look at data by polygon. And when you do that, you don't have to look at, well, this school, is a good school because this is the average test score, but you can break it out by the income level of the people in the polygon because you have that data. And then you can see that, oh, you know what, this school has a whole lot of polygons that have low income, and those polygons either do well or don't do well. And the same with the wealthy polygons. And so you can actually break out the income effect. It's like having individual data, not quite as good, statistically, but pretty good. And so we could actually see that if you lived in a wealthier neighborhood and went to a school that had a lot of low income students, it didn't harm your ability to perform. You did just as well as it didn't matter what school you went to. So that really wasn't the issue. And I think a lot of people had that assumption that, oh, if my kids go to this school, if I get bused, as they say, to this school, they're going to do badly because that school doesn't do well. No, your kids will do the same unless you're going to get a new job or something. So that isn't an issue. And actually your kids are going to do probably better because they're going to meet people that are different from themselves. And that's going to make their life, that's going to enrich their life, and it's going to make them more tolerant and more just a better citizen. So I think that there's some people resist this because they have this misunderstanding of what will happen if their kids have to go to a school with lower income students.
Yeah, Rick, I agree with that point of view. Although I also see the point of view that was shared during the previous redistricting when certain parents said, when they came to Howard County, they were told that they will be, in a certain area, in a certain school, and all of us, not all of a sudden, but over time, that changed. So that they feel like, there's been some they, you know, they don't feel like that's that, you know, they feel cheated basically. So I see that point of view, and you know, I think, you know, the question is, you know, what can the county, you know, the county do to, you know, to address that and make sure that people go to the schools that, you know, that they want to, and you know, that, and they don't feel cheated, and that, you know, and then trust does not, you know, does not get eroded. So does that so the same question, you know, why has the county not done anything about this problem? This has been going on for years. Everybody knows that this has been going on. Every 4 years, when the county council and the county executive run for office, they say they want to fight systemic racism. I mean, that's what they say every year, every 4 years, when they, as if systemic racism is some, you know, some nebulous thing that's going on out there, and you know, they're just out, you know, they're out there, you know, fighting it. Like, why has nothing been done to address this issue in Howard County over 25, 30 years?
Yeah, I just think it's time for the voters to hold elected officials.
Hey, Tanika, sorry, hang on one second. So we're gonna go to Lizette, and then we'll come back to you. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Yeah, so like for example, my students, I was doing when I left Centennial, then I went to work for Marriott Rich, then I went to Howard High, then what was the other one? Mount Hebron, and then finally Oakland Mill High, which that's my favorite school because it's half African American, half Hispanic. I love that school. And in that school, you know what struck me, that the students, even though they are minority, and they do, like for example, I was staying every afternoon to help out the Hispanic student, but they will only come towards the end of the first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter. I was like, guys, I'm waiting here for you in the cafeteria. Nobody's paying me for this time. I want you to help. I want to help you. You need to come to the cafeteria because I'm here available 3 days a week. But then I find out that these students, they work. They get out of the school at 2:10. They rush, somebody pick them up, or they walk, and then they start working at 4 p.m. all the way to midnight. Okay? I had one particular student, one girl. She was a teenage mom, very smart, very, very, very smart. And she wanted to do so well, you know, but she had to work. She has a baby. And it was tough for her, as, you know, before the thing with the formula, the baby formula started, before the crisis, just before, you know, I go and tell her, how you doing? You need help in something, just communicate with me. And, you know, I got for her the TI-84, you know, the calculator, graphing calculator, everything, because, you know, my daughter, they were not using it here anymore. And a lot of things. And then she was, Miss Lise, the thing that I worry the most is that I don't have the formula that my baby needs. And I go, why didn't you tell me that before? Let's go to Target. I used to work on Target. I have the Target red card. I tell her, I'll see you after 2:10. Took her in the car, went to the Target in Dublin, and I got all the formula thing that it was on the shelves. You know? And so why? I mean, I don't mind to do that at all. I mean, I will do for any student. I was here in my house. I was holding meetings for parents because I know that parents are documented. They don't want to go to the meeting to the school. And I told the parent, hey guys, in my house, no ICE or no police is going to come, okay? So you are safe here. This is a sanctuary house, okay? Maybe not sanctuary city, but it's a sanctuary house. So I was holding my meetings here because my undocumented parents, they feel safe. And I will do it. I don't care. If I'm breaking the law, well, oops. I don't care. I will do it, okay? You come and call eyes on me, but I will do it for my Hispanic student because I see that they work hard and they come here and they work. You go to the Korean restaurant. Who is the chef in the Korean restaurant? You go to the back of all those restaurants. Who is washing the dishes there? All Hispanic. So all these people are getting rich because of the cheap labor of Hispanic people. So we clean your houses, we cut your grass, we take care of your kids, we pay taxes, and we pay high rent. And then on top of that, we have no representation at school. Why? You know why? I know why. And I discovered it very recently. So this year, Mr. Calvin Ball, he approved a budget that will go to the Board of Education specifically to target the struggling students, to close the achievement gap. But guess what? The money that it was for hiring 7 new positions of Hispanic liaison. So, you know, if you have a Hispanic student and there is some problem, they won't go to any of the counselor because they won't feel comfortable with the counselor. They will go to somebody that speaks Spanish. And that happened to me in Centennial, in Mount Hebron. I had parents calling me at 3 a.m. in the morning because they don't have anybody else to call. And when they did the lockdown recently, at where was that, the lockdown at one of the high school, parents were texting me, what is a lockdown? What are they doing? What does that mean? So why do the parents have to text me? Thank goodness that they know me. Thank goodness that I am a resource for them. Why not the school system? So the 7 position that it was for the 7 liaisons, so we can have representation at the high school. Well, guess what? The 7 position, it was only 2 of them for Hispanic liaison, and the rest, it was for international liaison. So like I told Dr. Martinano, international liaison, they come here with English, they come here with money. They don't need that much representation because I'm sure that the other international liaison parents that they come here, they know what they are doing. We, the Hispanic, we don't have the money, we don't have the language, and we don't have representation at school. Why out of 12 high schools, there are only 4 liaison, Hispanic liaison? Why? You know, and we have, the worst part is that we have a lot of older newcomers. Again, in Oakland Mill High School, I had students that they were already 19-year-old and they were in 9th grade, you know? So yeah, that student is going to try to learn English as much as he can, but guess what? He had to go and work till midnight and he had to go and work the whole weekend. So maybe he get a chance, you know, just to get something to go to Howard County Community College. Another thing, if they're having the Howard County Community College, HCC, is there available. There is an Ambiciones program. I was organizing the visit to the Howard Community College to take my parents and my students in my groups. Why is the Board of Education not doing that? You know? So there is a lot of things that they don't want to invest because, of course, you know, we are undocumented. Even though we pay taxes, we don't vote. So I guess it's about that, you know?
Yeah, Lizette, I agree. I think there is a, you know, of course, with money, with money, there's those who are better off have the access to the resources, and you know, in fact, I think the last I recall, the county touted this $250 million budget surplus that, you know, that's out there, and so, you know, the question is, why isn't there money available to provide, you know, formula for that you know, a high school student who's, you know, who's a mother who's worried about formula, or like someone mentioned, like Jake mentioned on the comments here, why isn't there daycare, available for her? So there's, all the good ideas are there from people, like you, but I think it's the willingness of the public officials to provide that money available. And I will reiterate again, we need these leaders who are out there holding press conferences on issues that affect people of color to go out there and hold press conferences on these issues. These are the issues that affect these are the real issues that affect people of color, instead of some of the other manufactured outrage. So Tanika, I'm sorry, I cut you off earlier. Did you want to come back on? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Vicky kind of touched on it a little bit. I just want to close out just my part. I would just want to say, piggybacking off of what Rick said about the special, and I'm sorry, Miracle is bothering me, my assistant. One of the things I remember from that documentary was that he was saying the vision was that he wanted the CEO to be able to live next to the janitor. And I feel like when we are making decisions around housing and other issues, we need to kind of keep that vision in the back of our minds if we have a conscience. So.
Hey, Hiruy, there are actually a couple questions if you want to do questions.
Yeah, I will. I have one more question, and this is to people who participated in the Racial Equity Task Force last year, and I'm just gonna preface it with this: when around the same time that the Racial Equity Task Force was passed or implemented, the county gave money to a family of former slave owners, gave a lot of entitlement and money to a lot of slave owners around that time, in favorable zoning and land use deals. And I think maybe I'm sort of mixing up time here, but I think that was also around the time when the county executive vetoed the contract or the bill to cancel the ICE contract. So given that there were two bills that had meaningful impact, if one passed and if one was vetoed, actually, so vice versa. So the bill that passed, if that was the bill that gave money to the former slave owners, families of slave owners, if that was vetoed, and the ICE bill, if that had passed, then that would have had meaningful impact on people of color. But that was not what was done. So instead, they set up this Racial Equity Task Force. So I know that Tanika and one of our club members, Eduardo, were on there. So if Eduardo, if you're still, if you just need to come on a line to the camera, so we'll just go to Tanika first, and then and then we'll come to you, Eduardo, if you're willing to talk about it.
And so I was on the committee. What exactly was the question? I'm sorry.
Can you give us your observation of what happened with the Racial Equity Task Force, and what changes have we seen since there was the Racial Equity Task Force?
I mean, so yeah, I was asked to be on the committee, and yeah, I just feel like, well, I will say, to answer the right question, I haven't seen or heard about any of the recommendations being implemented. So let's just start there. Two, I don't know, it kind of feel like And sometimes we get that too, like when the government kind of put together these task force, the committee is more like a grand show or grandstanding. It's not necessarily really too many teeth, because kind of, in my opinion, at least I wasn't contacted for follow-up once the stuff was done. Again, I definitely do remember a lot of the recommendations being about doing the development and stuff in Western Howard County, and even in that committee, it was still a lot of pushback for that. So,
Okay, thanks, Tanika. Eduardo?
I think my impression is just 1 second, please. I need to be quietinha.
So
Eu tô na
what-
câmera agora, você não aparece não, tá? Sorry about that, Ben. Just letting family members know that I'm on camera and on mic right now. So I have basically the same initial impression that Tanika mentioned, that many times when the government organizes this kind of task force, it's mostly for show. It's like grandstanding. And in the end, the results will be very vague and very diffused, if any results. And in this case, I think it was a big part of it was damage control, for the fact that the two council people who proposed the task force were the ones who basically helped Calvin Ball kill the law that would have put an end to the contract with ICE at Jessup. So that was a major thing that didn't sit very well with those people who are concerned about social justice in the county. So it was a symbolic gesture, I suppose. That's how I saw it, because the simple fact that I was invited for it, somebody who doesn't have any name recognition in the county, but who was actively participating in the immigrant rights group that was fighting to close the contract with ICE. I think that was part of it, to show that, hey, we're doing something for immigrants too. We're even letting some of you brown immigrants in as well. And I was particularly because my concern was, again, the detention center. I was in the public and personal safety subgroup. And my first impression was, first, there's a lot of repetition in this kind of situation. They tend to invite always the same people, and it creates a certain expectation of reciprocity, that you're not going to create any major disagreements, so you can keep on participating in this kind of things. And in the end, most of them know each other. There is a large proportion of the members who were already public employees. In my specific subgroup, there was a heavy participation of the police forces and the prosecutorial, I don't know how that's pronounced, the word prosecutorial forces in the county. So it was interesting because first, I think is what I would classify as government-sponsored activism. So it's already kind of questionable from that standpoint. And then it's overstaffed and it's overstuffed with government employees. So the results tend to be a little predictable. And I haven't seen any results either so far. I haven't been contacted, and honestly, I do not expect to be contacted. It was, for me, as a very first time participating in this kind of situation, it was interesting to see how these things work. At the same time, I don't think it leads very far. It's nice PR for those in power, to show that they pretend they're doing something. And in the end, unfortunately, it's either very vague, obvious things that didn't require a task force to get to that point, or it doesn't produce any new results. So maybe I'm a little pessimistic there, but because I followed the entire situation with the detention center and the hard work of the Coalition for Immigrants' Rights, and how disappointed we were at the way things turned out, and how we felt like the immigrant community was thrown under the bus, by most of our politicians in the county. So it was, I already entered it with a certain level of skepticism, because I knew that a major reason why that was happening was for PR, for politicians that were involved in keeping the contract with ICE. So that was my final impression so far.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Eduardo.
Thank you.
So
Thank you,
Go
Tanika,
ahead.
for your wealth of information. That was great. It was very good to learn more about your work as well.
Thank you, likewise.
yeah, I was really I was not surprised, but still nonetheless furious or upset to hear how the racial equity task force was conducted. I believe I was the only one to testify against it because I think, you know, it basically was very performative and it was used to advance a developer. Again, it goes back to, you know, who the special interest is, and the majority of the work that took place revolved around housing, and it was to advance a narrative about housing that and so it was yeah, so that was it's very upsetting. Those are the questions that we have. So I'll just give the audience members a chance to, if you have any questions or comments, we can do that right now. We'll have like maybe, yeah, let's go for it if there are any questions.
Yeah, I mean, Eduardo had a couple questions that he typed to me, and so can I read you his questions, Eduardo, if you're okay with that?
I'm okay, and I apologize in advance for how long they are.
Right. So Eduardo, I think he already thanked Tanika. Hang on, Eduardo. So you had two questions. The first question was for Tanika, and hang on, I'm scrolling up to it. So, which schools, Tanika, did your kids attend, and have you noticed differences in the quality of schools related to the students' incomes? Because Eduardo's older child went to Hammond, and because of redistricting, his youngest is going to Reservoir, and he's seeing enormous differences. I know right now Reservoir is the most crowded high school in Howard County. Anyway, Tanika, if you can answer this.
So I will start out by saying that we were not affected by the redistricting whole scenario scheme. Almost though, but the community kind of came together, and I don't know, someone must have had some money somewhere, because they was definitely trying to, because at the time, just for background purposes, we lived in I guess the Thunder Hill community. So my kids were going to Oakland Mills, but I should say my two oldest had already kind of graduated. So I have two OM grads already. So it would have affected, if they had to get bused, it would have affected, I guess, my middle schooler at the time. He would have, at the time they were proposing for our community to bus the kids to Wild Lake. He would have went to Wild Lake Middle, which absolutely did not make sense at all. And just as a parent, I don't care about like home values or like, the kids, you know what I mean? For me, it was like one of the things that drew me to Howard County was the whole idea of neighborhood schools, and kids can go to school in the neighborhood where they live. So that's like a big piece to me. And then also kind of tying back into the economics and family participation and PTA meetings and things of that nature. We're moving kids, from walking distance to now a bus or a car distance. How are families supposed to really participate and be active in that child's learning? So, but to answer his question, my kids went to Oakland Mills, and I did not, despite the contrary of popular belief, OM was a really good school. I loved it. My kids didn't have any issues. I feel like they got, a good education, better than what they would have got if we lived in Baltimore City. So that's like comparing apples and oranges, right? But yeah, like I love OM.
Well, first of all, Tanika, go Scorps.
Yes.
As a proud OMHS class of '83 graduate, there I can wonder how old I am.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I wanted to, I actually have a second question from Eduardo for Lisa and Rick, but before I lose you, Tanika, I'm gonna take advantage of my time on air here and ask a question, is that you said you don't care about housing values. And I think one of the things that really divides classes and races is that chasing of home values. And a lot of white people have built wealth, my parents included, because like we moved into the house that I happen to live in right now. We moved into this house in 1970, and it's the values here in Thunder Hill have shot through the roof. So they've used those home values, whether you're here in Howard County or anywhere in the nation, to build wealth. They've used that to send kids to college. And I do think that is part of the issue when it comes to who are your neighbors and who gets to go to what schools and things like that. I don't know if you want to comment on that or not.
Yeah. So I'm definitely about, because look, I could have a whole nother conversation about how Black and brown people were locked out of the opportunity to build that wealth, right? That your people got to. So when I say like I don't care about wealth, I'm saying that in the sense of I know that was one of the main talking points. During that whole time period, it was like they're gonna bring down my home values if you put my kid in a class with a farm student, which didn't make no daggone sense to me. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Well, I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I wonder if you think this too, is that, so having grown up in Columbia during the heyday of Rouse's vision, when we did have, if you drive around Long Reach, if you go over there to the Phelps Lake area, you will drive down High Tor Hill and you will see beautiful, large houses, right? And right in their backyard is low-income housing, townhouses. But those houses have not lost, I will say this, I don't believe that the houses in Phelps Lake have lost their value. I think it's a fallacy that because you have mixed income neighborhoods, I think it's a fallacy to say that the houses lose their value. I mean, I think people have been conditioned to think that, but I don't think that it's true. Because, Thunder Hill sadly does not have, we are all single family homes here in Thunder Hill. However, we went to school with the kids in Talbot Springs, the kids from Stevens Forest. And if you go over to Stevens Forest, similar to Phelps Lake, you see townhouses, you see low-income housing, you see apartments, you see everything in that neighborhood. And I would say that based on what I see when I look on Realtor, those houses have not lost their value.
Listen, you're absolutely right, because I'm looking to buy now.
Right.
And Long Reach is still, I'm like, well, shoot, you let them tell it. This should be the most affordable village of them all,
Right.
So it is not, and if you go even further up to Phelps Lake, even though those new homes are zoned to Howard High, those were like over $1 million homes that they build within walking distance of those other communities. So yeah, I just think it's definitely, like you said, a fallacy. It's this whole not in my backyard mentality. I've tried to tone down my presence in a lot of groups because I don't want to get put in jail on Facebook, but I used to be really active in a lot of the groups during these heated conversations, because I've definitely noticed like the white flight, if I should say, people fly into Carroll County as if Carroll County isn't being overdeveloped, because I have several Black relatives and bought houses in Tiny Town of all places, right? So I'm like, listen, Black people, like, we're everywhere. So if that's your solution to like, I'm just gonna move, because you don't want to live next to someone because you think of a certain income, I just think it's just ridiculous and unfortunate. And I think someone else on the panel mentioned that it really puts your kids at a disservice because they're not exposed to other cultures and other situations if you just are raising them in this bubble, right? So yeah, it's just unfortunate.
Yeah. I want to interject here real quick because I think it's all these points are good. The concern is you can't regulate individual choices, but you can regulate macro zoning decisions. And the proposition that I think we can say how each individual person can make a decision on where they purchase, to me that's a losing proposition. I think we can say, though, 5 council members and a county executive, how they make the decision, that's an easier target And if they make the decision in such a way that they're requiring Howard Hughes to build the 1,000 affordable housing units that they promised, then we may not have to deal with the decisions of individual people. So that's what I feel like is getting lost on that. Sorry, I just
No,
wanted
that's
to
okay.
And that's a
interject
good
there.
point. And just really quick too, to touch on Karen's point, I also lived in Owen Brown at a time, and I remember doing research on Cradle Rock. I don't know if that's still the case today. I don't know if Rick is on the call. He's really good with the data, with the education part. But I know at once upon a time, like Cradle Rock had like the highest farm rates and all this other, like supposed to have like the lowest testing scores and all this stuff. And even though the homes over there, even though they were zoned to Cradle Rock, still had held that value and actually increased in value as well during the pandemic. I know because I've been looking. So where before those townhomes were like, the upper 200s or like 350, now they're like 4 and 5. So just again, another further evidence to your point that even if it's not necessarily the public house, because there's not a lot of public housing over there, I should say, in Owen Brown, to my knowledge, but I know it's a lot of like I know Cradle Rock definitely did have a lot of farm students at once upon a time.
Yeah, I think it's because a lot of those kids live in apartments.
And
And I want to follow up because Eduardo actually had a question also, which I think segues really well from what we were just discussing for Rick and Lizette, saying the issue with ending the contract between ICE and the Jessup Detention Center, poor immigrants tend to live in rather precarious conditions here in Howard County. And I've seen trailer homes being shared by multiple families. Do you think the county's adamant refusal to end the contract initially may have had to do, in addition to obvious financial advantage issues, with sending a message to the wealthy residents and sorry, to mess up your question here, Eduardo, I didn't scroll fast enough, was sending a message to the wealthy residents and developers that poor undocumented immigrants are not welcome here? So I don't know, Rick or Lizette, who you guys want to take that?
I'll start because I'll relate it to the previous discussion too. I think in both cases, there is a message from the county government that we are a government of the wealthy, and we'll keep your home value. Like, my response to that, I mean, I wanted to say there's several people from the same neighborhood on this panel, which is kind of I'm also Thunder Hill, but we were actually districted to Howard High School for when we moved in. We didn't have children. We didn't know one thing from the other, but we were redistricted to Oakland Mills, and I don't think it had any negative effect on our housing value. And I think we ended up in a school that wasn't as crowded and was a very good school. So we were happy with that in the end. But it's the same issue, isn't it? We're going to protect the value of those wealthy neighborhoods. But what are you doing to the value of the other neighborhoods, the ones that
Right.
you're concentrating all the poverty in? You're just moving money. And there's no reason that the government should be moving money to its favored residents, give money to the rich. It just doesn't make sense. It shouldn't be doing it anyway. And if people don't have anything else, they need to invest in some other things too and diversify a little bit for their future, because they shouldn't be absolutely dependent upon the value of their house going up. Because like any investment, who knows what's going to happen? It isn't going to be managed for the individual. It's going to be managed for the good of the community. So, but the contract, definitely, the fact that we had that systemic racist issue that we're putting people in jail mainly because of their race. Like we say, well, they're immigrants, but if they were Canadian illegal immigrants, we didn't put them in jail. We put brown and black people in jail, people from the Caribbean and Latin America, and sometimes Africa. And those were the people that got put in jail. And mainly, they were not criminals. And some of them had traffic violations. Some of them didn't have anything. So that is sending a message to both sides. And then when you have cops in the schools, the SROs, when ICE is looking for people, then you've got all these uniformed people walking around the schools, just creating more terror for these kids. So all these issues come together, right? So,
Lizette, did you want to add anything to that?
I have a question. You know, if the developers, they really want, because I haven't seen that here in Ellicott City or any other city. If they really want something like a, you know, secluded and, you know, segregated, why they don't build here private communities? I haven't seen many private communities over here, you know? You know,
There is
private
one here.
community?
They're just down the road from Gorman Road. Man, it looks like a horror movie thing. I hope none of you guys live there, man. It's, you know, the one with the big lake in the middle, and oh man, it's. I've been there once because my daughter's classmate lived
Uh-huh.
there. It looks like a Stephen King neighborhood. It's beautiful. It's very rich, but it's so weird because it's like completely isolated from the rest of the community. You know.
No, but I
It's
mean, that will be a solution. When I had my kids, I when I came here to this country, that I got married, I came directly to the city of Diamond Bar. So the city of Diamond Bar was kind of like a, like this, that like Ellicott City, like a very, you know, upper class. And then inside that city, there was a private community that whoever could afford $1 million house, well, you know,
Aqui subiu.
perfecto, you know. And I used to live in one
Dá
of
uma
those
olhadinha
communities,
nela.
you know. But outside
Não,
on
uma
Grand
sentadinha, tá?
Avenue, we had all the apartments for the, you know, for the whoever couldn't afford, you know. So if you are here on Ridgeline Road where we used to live, you can go and look down because it was a very hilly area, and you can see the whole surrounding. It was all apartments, so there was a balance. There was a balance, you know. You want to live in your rich $1 million house, that's fine. You can afford it, good. But they had also, you know, apartment for people who couldn't afford. So I don't see many private community here. So maybe that will be some suggestion for the developer if they really want to, you know.
Yeah, the people are saying in the chat that's not really something that's been part of the tradition of Howard County, and I think that you can have like diverse communities without gated communities, basically. But I want to transition real quick, use my sort of executive privilege as the president here because we are running out of time. But I want to touch on a question that Manesh had asked in the chat that was sort of already touched on a little bit, but I want to give my take on it. Manesh said, how can we express the importance of these issues when a significant chunk of the Howard County voting base, including other immigrant and minority groups, genuinely care more about their property values than issues like racial equity? And I used to really buy into that framing, that the question was asked in. And, you know, in the last year or so, I've started to kind of question that framing more. And I want to explain, you know, why I think that framing is flawed. And first I'll preface it by, think of any political issue in any level of government. You know, we want to look at the federal government as an example. Typically how things work is the corporations and moneyed interests are calling the shots, are making the decisions, are controlling the politicians, but people don't want, the corporations don't want everybody knowing that. I mean, everybody kind of does know that, but for the most part, the corporations don't want to take the blame. The rich and the wealthy don't want to take the blame for all the problems, because then everybody will be pissed and demand change. So what they do is they look for groups that are less powerful than them to scapegoat and blame all the issues on, and then get everybody fighting, get all the regular people fighting amongst each other so that nobody's looking at the corporations, blame the problems on them. Then they, you know, run out the back with all the money. And I use that example because it's no different in county politics, or at least my perception. And the way that, you know, sort of your question framed it, and the framing that I used to buy into it is, you know, why are these problems existing in the communities? Why are the schools segregated? Why are the communities segregated? It's because of those darn NIMBYs. It's those darn, you know, wealthy homeowners that if they just got over their bigotries and their prejudice and just let people move in the you know, all the problems would be solved. And I used to really buy into that framing, but now that I've, talked to more people about the issue, I start to think like maybe that scapegoating, that's the scapegoating that's going on at the local level, is they want you to blame, homeowners or people in your community, which it might be hard to not think of them as, powerful, because relative to some groups in society, they might, they do have more power, but compared to a developer or corporation, they really do not have that much power. And, if somebody, is concerned that redistricting might lower their home value by $100,000 or whatever the number may be, I think the question that needs to be asked is, why are there such disparities in the schools in the first place that it would wildly change somebody's home value? And that is a systemic question with the systemic solution. But if we're just focusing on the adverse reaction of the homeowner, then we're just blaming the homeowner and the neighbor. And so I would continue, but I see Drew, looks like Drew wants to chime in there.
Right, because I want to build on exactly what you said, because it is so on point, right? The reason why redistricting is such a challenge is because schools do not get built in the locations where the students live. They get built next to new developments to enrich the developer. High School 13 being the perfect example, which is at a site that was chosen because the Gould family gave thousands of dollars to the county executive candidates 8 years ago. And when Alan Kittleman was elected, he immediately chose that for the school site. And the Goulds intend to build a great big flashy new town center right next to it. So all of this arguing we do about redistricting is, as you said, obscures the actual underlying cause, which is developers choosing school sites for their own advantage and not putting schools where they benefit the families and students of Howard County.
And it works for schools, but it also works just for housing. Is, it's been the developers that have developed the community in a segregated manner, which has developed the schools in a segregated manner and created massive inequities. And then when people don't want to go to the areas that have been facing the inequities, to me, that, it's somewhat of an understandable response. It doesn't make it right, but I'm more concerned of who are the people that cause the underlying problems, the underlying root problems in the first place.
That's very good points there, Jake. So I think Jake and Drew, I just want to emphasize, you can't regulate individual choices. You can't say the only way you regulate individual choices is by creating a zoning and land use condition where people can go and buy a certain house that they want in a certain place. That's what's been done. So after, let's remember, the same people who lament the homeowners for having, for wanting to, preserve their quote unquote wealth, will also preach about, encouraging people of color to build wealth by buying a home. I mean, it's just completely contradictory, so when it suits the narrative, it hurts, and when it suits the narrative, it helps. So yeah, some people may choose to go to a wealthy school because they don't want their children to be with poor families, or with Black and brown families. That's not, that nobody would deny that. But I think, to say that, to explain the whole problem by just that would not be doing service to would be doing a disservice to the, to the issue. And I wanna just, I just saw Joel's hand pop up. So After Joel's comment, we'll close it out.
I was just gonna say that I didn't agree with Drew's comment about the Goulds. The problem was that decades ago, they let all the places where in the eastern part of the county where you might consider putting a high school that needs 50 plus acres, turn into houses or other things.
We had 4 different alternatives of 50 acres for a school site in Elkridge. Joel, your statement is false.
Yes, there are, but some of them entail buying up a developed parcel for UPS, which had different costs. So
Every place you could possibly build a school anywhere, the land is already used for something now. That is not relevant.
well, not the Gould, it was trees. But had the county not given away things 30 years ago and preserved the land bank problem is that the land is where I live in the middle of Columbia. They have an excess of elementary school sites and don't need them. They traded away the land bank in Longreach for the church for a subprime parcel in Marysville Road.
Alleged bad decisions 30 years ago in no way are a justification for Elkridge not having a high school the same as every other similar part of Howard County. It will cost more because of those bad decisions, but that does not mean we don't get a high school. That is fundamental equity. Every kid gets to see over the wall.
I mean, with that, the problem, I just didn't think it's gold. The Golds didn't came kicking and screaming. They didn't give away the land. They had to negotiate it with all sorts of things. And the fact that the community center gets a payment based on the amount of rock that's quarried, it's going to terminate when the quarry closes. I mean,
Well,
there are a
Joe,
lot of details associated with all that land over there that's hard to figure out who's benefit. But yes, they should have saved more land, and the places are available in the industrial part off of Route 1 that nobody wants to put a school there either, next to some of those places.
Joel, so I think, sure, they should have saved more land. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Drew's point is, in general, the pattern has been that the way that schools have been built is to provide an attractive amenity for a builder or new develop for a big residential development for the builder. And
But if that was true,
the high school 13 was,
the Mangionis in Turf Valley would have not been kicking and screaming to come up with an agreement to give the land. They would have said, here, I want an elementary school, please build it so it's in my community. They didn't do that for the last 40 years or 50 years that they've been working on Turf Valley. So
okay. So I think we're gonna do like a redistricting. We're planning on, there was a discussion of doing a redistricting program sometime in the future. So maybe we'll resume it there. So I will close it out now, but I'll just close it out with this point. Howard County had a racist sheriff for 10 years that was elected, I think for 2 or 3 different elections. He was nominated and endorsed by the local Democratic Party and some of these community leaders for 3 election years, and everything was fine until someone had the courage to provide a report to the county to report, to provide to complain to the county Office of Human Rights, and that investigation was what led to his ouster. So my point is, he was fine until it was no longer
And they gave him like
untenable.
$50,000 too to leave.
Right. Yeah, a lot. There was a negotiation, and he was given money, a severance pay, to leave. So the problem that, we have the issues that are true source of outrage are swept under the rug or ignored, and the issues that are manufactured outrage are used to rile people up. And I think we and at the PDHC, Progressive Democrats of Howard County, we think that's it's a huge problem. It undermines trust in government. Already that's trust that's already fragile. So it needs to change. So thanks to our panelists. Thanks to everybody who attended. And this the meeting since it's recorded, will be uploaded to our Facebook and YouTube pages. And so with that, we'll say goodbye.
Yes, thank you, Hiruy, and all the panelists. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.